Hi, everyone. Welcome back. And if this is your first foray, welcome to the Standard Age podcast. My first guest for season 2 is Derek Keller, the founder and creator of 440 Gnetleman Supply, a handmade leather goods company based in my hometown of Raleigh, North Carolina. So I was really eager to share Derek's journey with all of you. He's a very dear friend of mine, so it only felt right kicking off season 2 with our conversation. We talk about his reason to hate Budweiser, using German military vehicles for marketing purposes, and why it's important as a creator to actually make your own vision as opposed to someone else's. I love the tongue-in-cheek approach with which he and his wife Jessie approach their business, and you simply won't meet a more genuine person. And if you're ever in Raleigh, please visit the new space called Unlikely Professionals. I describe it as a retail oasis for all that you need and nothing you don't. I'm your host, Wesley Smith, and you're listening to the Standard Age podcast. Derek Keller.
What's up, man?
Welcome to the podcast.
Thanks for having me. Good to see you. Thanks for coming to North Carolina again, finally.
Well, wouldn't miss it for sure. Usually I start every episode off with where people grew up.
Yeah.
So let's talk about Winston-Salem.
Oh, man. The Dash.
Dash.
As it's come to be called these days. So I grew up in Winston-Salem. Born and raised in North Carolina. Moved around a little bit, but been here pretty much my whole life. And moved to Raleigh, where we are now, for college, and pretty much stayed here since then.
Right. So what were the kinds of things you were doing growing up? What did your parents do?
So my dad worked in the beer industry for most of my life.
That's right,
he worked,
Miller, right?
Yeah, I worked for Miller for 30 plus years. So I came very accustomed to seeing Miller Lite, Miller High Life filled in our basement every day.
Champagne of beers.
It is champagne of beers. So that's what paid the bills. So I grew up hating Budweiser because that's the devil and it's the enemy. So Miller for life,
Now he was in sales, or
no? He was basically he was in the so there's a brewery in Eden, which is like an hour north of Winston-Salem, kind of towards Virginia. So he worked in the brewery. So he was like product control. So he was like his title changed many times, but he was some type of product engineer, so quality control and keeping the lines going and fixing the machine. So he was literally like in there taste testing. We always made fun. He had official taste tester shirt. So I'm like, God, talk about a dream job. When I was at college, I thought it was a dream job.
I was just about to say he must be drinking constantly.
Well, the funny thing is he doesn't drink now, but
funny.
Yeah, but
well, I guess you could, like in wine, right? When you taste it, you could just spit it out or whatever. But
yeah. So when I think too, the sad thing is I feel like a lot of people there you see do drink all the time. So it's like a lot of people go to work at those places and then develop like, oh shit, we probably shouldn't drink anymore because they're around it all the time.
Right, sure.
But yeah, in college it was pretty awesome. Like, yeah, my dad works for Miller. And then when I was finally of age to drink, I'm like, hey Dad, mind if I take this 6-pack of High Life from the garage back to school? And then, even like dumb Miller merchandise. I got an 8-foot tall inflatable Miller Lite bottle in college, and we're like, yeah, man, we're going to go have a keg party, and we're going to blow up this giant Miller bottle and tie it to our stairs
like
outside.
You're sponsored?
Yeah, like we're like, so I'm telling everybody all day long at NC State, like, hey, guys, we're having a keg party. Come just look for the big Miller Lite bottle. We had to go to the bike shop to inflate the thing, strapped it to my roommate's roof because it was so big. So we're driving, down the road through Raleigh with this 8-foot tall beer bottle on top.
Priceless.
and tied it to the stairs of our apartment. And we're all inside getting ready for the keg party. Come outside 15 minutes later and somebody stole the damn thing.
No way.
So nobody even. Yeah,
I guess that's inevitable, right?
Yeah, it was. We were asking for it, but
it was too nice.
It was too nice. Yeah.
You had to take it.
Yeah, hot commodity in college area.
So, did your mom work?
She did when I was really young, but most of my life she didn't. She was a stay-at-home mom. She had some part-time gigs, but for the most part she was stay-at-home, take care of us, me and my sister. I have an older sister. So, but both my parents have always been kind of crafty. My dad started off as a shop teacher, so he's a very talented woodworker. He's made a million pieces of furniture that were in our house.
In your house?
In our house.
Or you growing up?
Growing up, yeah. I mean, I do still have some stuff that he's made, and he still comes and helps fix pretty much everything. He is very mechanically inclined with cars, motorcycles, wood, you name it. And then my mom on the other side was also pretty crafty. She's knitted and sewn. She did a lot of sewing and making clothes, and I think I got some of that from her too. I used to love. I was the weird guy at that time in school that loved home ec in middle school and high school, and loved sewing, loved crafts. That's so it was like, cool. Yeah, I'm going to go ride my skateboard and I'm going to go sew some clothes. That's all I did.
That's awesome. So then in high school, were you like helping your dad in the workshop or like doing anything like that? Like
not much in high school. I mean, I think when I really started doing stuff with him was probably younger, like middle school. My dad, one of his other side gigs, you know, and his garage was leather belts. So he did some leather work, you know, as a hobby. But so I did a lot of that with him. Did some stuff with my mom with sewing still at that time. But then high school, I mean, I think as most people do, I'm like, don't really want to go sew and play with your mom at the sewing machine all the time. So I was like, I'm going to go ride my skateboard, ride my bike or whatever.
Right.
But I was still very into, like, I remember high school and home ec and loving that. And I remember the teacher even saying to me, Derek, you're really good. Have you ever considered a career in like sewing? I'm like, no, I don't care about that. I'm gonna ride my skateboard. You know, like I'm gonna be a professional skateboarder. I'm gonna be a professional mountain biker. I don't care about sewing, but you know, little did I know some of those skills would come back into play later.
Oh, that's funny. So then you went on to NC State, right?
Yep. NC State.
What'd you study?
Well, I started off in forestry, oddly enough. Had no idea what I was doing. I just knew I liked to ride mountain bikes. I like playing in the woods. Hey, forestry sounds great.
Well, that seems logical.
Yeah. So, but I stayed in that program for a year and switched over to business management after that, and marketing, and that's where I remained for the rest of it. Forestry was fun, and then I got to I'd heard horror stories of dendrology, like the naming of plants. And everybody like, oh, that's the weed. No pun intended. It's the weed out class, right. For forestry. But it, right before the semester, I had to take that. I'm like, I don't want to do this anymore. I don't want to take that class. I'm done.
It's like the organic chemistry of
yeah. It's
of
so
forestry.
Apparently the story is you know, it's only offered in the fall, and your final exam is, you know, so December, and your final exam is you go into the woods and the professor points like, hey, what is that? And you have to know what it is, the scientific name, everything about it. But the thing is, half the shit doesn't have leaves at that time. So it's
right,
like,
yeah.
So like that was like the weed out class. So many people apparently flunked. I got out before I ever took it. Those were just the stories that were told to me. But,
that's crazy.
yeah.
So obviously you and I met at Banana Republic.
Yeah.
I don't even know what year that was. 99?
I feel like that was for me shortly right after college. I don't even know exactly what year that was, but where did you cut your teeth in retail? Well, so I started off in bicycle shops.
Same.
Yeah. And so that was pretty much during, late part of high school and all of college. That was kind of my part-time gig, working in bicycle shops.
Now, so in high school, what shops were you at?
So I was
Winston?
at the Piedmont Peddler at the time. That was
Yeah.
in Kernersville. No longer there.
Right.
Rest in peace.
Right.
And then let's see. I went to, gosh, where was I? I helped out for a very short period, All-Star here for a very short period, and then Paul Schwinn, which is no longer around either. They had a Paul Schwinn location in Greensboro that I worked at. And then later on, I came back to help my friend Frank, who opened a shop, run his shop, and that was actually what brought me back to Raleigh after some previous jobs to come back and manage his store.
Right.
But that was in between I did a lot of other retail before coming back into that.
Sure.
Banana Republic was kind of like a part-time gig, and then oddly enough, I went and worked in Abercrombie for like 6 months, which was the worst 6 months of retail experience you could imagine.
You were only there for 6 months?
Yeah, it was. I want to say like 6 or 8 months. It wasn't long.
I didn't realize that.
Yeah, and then I got recruited to Guess, and I stayed at Guess for some years.
You know, it's funny. I was talking about you the other day because we were. Guess came up in conversation.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh yeah, my buddy Derek actually used to manage a Guess
Yeah.
in Raleigh, and we got on the topic of those those G watches.
Oh yeah.
Remember the ones that were like mimicking those of Gucci?
Oh yeah.
I'm pretty sure there was a
The
lawsuit
G even
in
looked.
there
Oh
somewhere.
yeah. Absolutely, I'm sure.
And so anyway, that's funny that I was just talking about this the other day.
Yeah, and at the time I was like, oh my God, this is a dream to work for this company after being in just the hell of what Abercrombie was.
What was so bad about it?
Oh my God! Well, you were paid shit. You had to sign a contract that you got paid instead of overtime. You agreed to work halftime. So when you went over your 40 hours, instead of paying time and a half, they would pay you half of what your hourly rate would be, and you had to sign that upon work. So it was just total abuse of that. So I mean, we would do 80-hour weeks and do floor sets all day, and just because they could just pay you shit.
Are you kidding me?
Yeah.
Wow.
Top secret info. I don't know if that's out there, but had to agree to be
wonder
paid
if it's
halftime.
still that way. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know.
That's
I mean, they've gone
insane.
through a lot of things and issues throughout the years. Who knows now? But
Oh my God.
Yeah.
And then after Guess, you were
oh gosh,
was that Red Bull?
So no, so I had a lot of jobs. Let me see if I could actually.
Haven't we all?
I'm like, I don't even know if I can count them all right now. After that, I went to work for Reebok. I worked for Reebok as a marketing rep for the Carolinas.
That's right. I forgot about
so
the Reebok
I was
thing.
traveling. It was a program based mainly on like better department stores is what I was focused on. So it was North and South Carolina, hosting, putting on events, training the stores on technology and the shoes and blah blah blah. So I did that, and
What was your territory there?
North and South Carolina.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, pretty much the whole. Yeah, the whole state. There was a small portion of South Carolina just it just wasn't worth going to because it was a portion of South Carolina that nobody goes to or wants to go to. So did that, and then let's see. After Reebok, I think was that Red Bull. I think that was Red Bull.
You would know better than I
I'm
would.
like, I don't even. No. Okay, no, that's it. Reebok, and then that's what I came back to because the Reebok program. That's how it worked. Now I remember. The Reebok program they were doing away with, like that whole program, or for my territory at least. So they were going to move me to DC or Atlanta, and I didn't want to go to either of those places at the time. And that's when my friend Frank was opening a bike shop in Raleigh, and he's like, "Hey, will you come help me get this thing going?" And
That's
I was
right.
like,
Frank
"Okay."
was before Red Bull.
Yeah, and he was a buddy. I mean, we used to go to bike races together for many years, so knew him well. Never worked with him, but he's a good friend, and so that's what brought me back and worked with him for a few years. And then after the bike shop was Red Bull, and I was at Red Bull for almost 7 years, 6 or 7 years. It was a pretty long. Yeah, it was a pretty long. As far as my job history, it was pretty long.
So that was more or less focused on marketing, or
Yeah.
was it more sales, or
No,
both?
it was marketing based.
Okay.
So it was my title changed a few different times. It started off as I think it was called team manager at the time, and then it was like a field marketing manager. So they changed the titles a few times, but same basic role. But it was for that it was Eastern North Carolina. So I had basically Winston-Salem to the coast, the Outer Banks.
And that was back when they were really doing more grassroots. I mean, still doing grassroots when they were rolling out all the Mini Coopers.
Yeah, it was very. Yeah, that was
stuff
the
like that.
days of, and I don't know if they're even still using the Mini Coopers. I haven't seen them around much
I'm not
anymore,
sure.
but
Yeah, I don't know.
yeah, so it was very grassroots based. It was supporting the various underground scenes at that time and finding core ways to be part of those in an organic way and not slapping logos on it, but what tools do we have, which was a cool thing to be part of at that time because Red Bull did have or still does have some deep pockets in that world. So it's like they had amazing tools that you could pull out, be it a cool event vehicle that we can use at something, or a giant tent, or an awesome bar that we could bring out instead of like, hey, we're going to support your skate contest or bike race or whatever with slapping your logo and here's a check. We never did it that way. It was like, what can we do that will organically make the event better, and not give a check or put our logo on it. Granted, the logo was usually on whatever you were providing, but
Sure.
It was a neat way to bring a different element to events.
So, like, what's an example of something that, like, maybe you put the Red Bull touch on?
Oh, man, so we did a lot of things. We had some very cool event vehicles. So they had, what's it called? It's an old, was it a German military vehicle? I'm drawing a blank on the name. I'll think of it in a second. But they had a few.
Pinzgauer?
Yeah, Pinzgauer.
Pinzgauer.
Yeah. So we had a Pinzgauer was one of them. We had a few different ones that they added to the arsenal throughout the years. But like the Pinzgauer was this just badass, drive it through freaking anything. So we would go and it had a high speed winch attached to it. So we could go out to like do some crazy wakeboarding event and find like some crazy fountain in the middle of some downtown and be like, find some, maybe it was a collegiate wake group or something, like, hey guys, you want to go run out and ride a freaking wakeboard through the fountain in downtown, wherever. Totally illegal, but really awesome, and getting some great footage off of it. So you get this awesome piece of, we usually bring video out for that as well. And so there was awesome content made from it of doing these sometimes, illegal operations.
So were they being pulled by this winch?
Yeah. So they will. Yeah, we would pull the Pinzgauer.
So you would just like park it on one side of the fountain and then pull the dudes through.
Use the winch over and then crank the winch up and just like drag them across all these places.
I've got to find footage.
Yeah,
of
there's some cool shit that was done with that. And
That's
then
amazing.
So that vehicle we did a lot of stuff with. We took even just taking people off road riding in it. Like we would do like there was the NC State had a car racing club. And I think they were doing, I can't remember what they were doing. It was some type of, maybe it was rally race. They had a rally team. That's what it was. And so
I wish I knew about this stuff 20 years ago.
So we just, stuff like, hey, let's go pick up the rally team and pick them up and take them out in the Pinzgauer or out to some spot and just drive them off road and, just stuff that might not be a big event, but just like something that was memorable for that group that was, a key audience for the brand.
Yeah, because that contributes to word of mouth and they'll tell all their buddies about it.
And that was, and that was before. It was so funny, and this was kind of towards the end of my stint with Red Bull, but that was when they had launched Red Bull Media and Media House, Red Bull TV, I guess it's called now. And the vision at that time was 10 years from now, Red Bull is going to be half, or maybe not even half. At the time, I think they said like half energy drink and the other half as a media company. And everybody were like, what? What are they talking about? They're going to try to be a media like they're going to have a TV station? Well, they do now, and it worked because
that's insane.
As they found like these weird events, we were doing things, and we had all this content that was amazing to watch. People wanted to see it, and so we already owned the content. We weren't buying content to put on a TV station. It's all Red Bull owned content. Why not share it and build the brand that way as well?
Right.
And that was kind of the direction they've gone now. So pretty interesting.
Completely vertical from that standpoint.
Yeah. That's
insane. I mean, good for them.
Yeah, it's very.
And the content's insane.
It's a cool company. I think I learned a lot there with many lessons, many drinks, Red Bull and other drinks, but Shambull. A side note, Shambull, if you haven't tried it, is pretty good. I'm not a champagne drinker, but we always had Shamballs at events.
Oh, as opposed to Red Bull and vodka, you put champagne.
Yeah, champagne and Red Bull. It's pretty damn good.
Really?
Yeah.
I just read an article recently about Red Bull being like such a far-fetched idea upon their release and their launch, because it was like, how do you gain market share from Coca-Cola?
Yep. Everybody said it wouldn't work.
Most people's like first intuition is to say, well, you need to make Coca-Cola and you need to make it cheaper.
Yeah.
Well, they did the exact opposite. Not only did they make a caffeinated beverage, but they made it more expensive and less of it.
Yeah.
So an 8-ounce can versus a 12-ounce can. And then you're selling it for more than a 12-ounce can of. And, oh, by the way, it didn't taste that great.
Right.
And that was like the market research that they did, yet it's still just, they blew the doors off the thing.
Yeah, it's pretty incredible. I mean, like Dietrich, who started it, and everybody told him, like, there's no market for this. And his statement was always, we're going to make the market for it. And that's why, like, the genius marketing they came up with is what built that.
It was like targeting the youth.
Yeah, and basically. It wasn't like, oh, it was never like, taste this. It's amazing. Like, the pitch was never like, taste this. It
was like, drink this and you can do this.
And the interesting thing, like in sampling, you see every other beverage company, I would venture to say, when they do sampling, like, here, taste, here's a little cup, like, in the grocery store, like, here, taste this.
Sure.
And that was the complete opposite and the biggest no-no within the company at the time. I assume it's the same.
Don't let them taste it.
Well, don't let them taste it, but it was we give you an entire can. So they're out, when we're out, it wasn't like, taste this, here's a $2 can. So, I mean, the amount given out was a shit ton of money, but the pitch was always not like, taste this, it's awesome. It was, this is a serving that will benefit you in whatever way. So like, drink this can, it's going to help you ride your wakeboard better. Like whatever it was. Right. It was like, it was a performance based and an experience, and not like, taste this. It was, here, take this. It's going to enhance what you're doing, which is interesting.
It's like the future production value of your output versus the great flavor of right now.
And I think that's partly too, I mean, another thing of like having deep pockets at that time too, like a lot of companies probably aren't willing to put that money to give full cans to hundreds of people at an event, it's right. But that's what they would do. And it's like, if you're giving away how many full cans, how many is that person going to buy afterwards, and looking at the big picture as opposed to have a sip of this and maybe you'll buy some later.
So, I hate to just, completely
this
embark
is the Red
on
Bull
a
podcast.
Red Bull podcast. Yeah, but honestly, like, because Monster Energy drink is huge too, right? So, like, but I feel like they came in after Red Bull. Similar timing, but I feel like I heard about Red Bull first.
Red Bull,
for whatever
pretty sure
reason.
And I'm trying to. I used to be able to tell you the whole history and know it like the back of my hand.
But like, what was there like a competitive advantage that Red Bull had over Monster at the time, or was because to me it was always like a demographic thing.
It was a totally different demographic, even like marketing wise. I mean, when I was there, that was when Monster was kind of big on the scene, and big. I mean, in big ways, like, I got a big monster truck, I got a big can, I got more fluid, as opposed to, it was just a different pitch than what we were doing. And I think a lot of that's changed now. And I think for whatever it's worth, I think maybe Monster has changed. I don't even know. I don't really pay attention to them now.
Yeah, I mean, me neither.
But, I think we were still targeting other scenes that maybe they weren't. They came in like extreme, sports, and while Red Bull was part of that, we were always wanting to be involved in the culture scene. So we did a lot with the arts and seeding product to musicians and artists. At the same time I was there, Red Bull started a music label, which they still have. If you didn't know that, they have state of the art recording studio in their headquarters in California. So a lot of things like that were still setting them apart, I think, and staying ahead of the game. I mean, there were. Every month we looked at the competitive charts of other drinks, and it was amazing to see, like, oh, they came on the market, they're out of business. They came on, they're out. It was like a new one every month. But everybody was trying to get their piece of the pie because it was such a big hot market, and still is. But to see, like, millions try to copy but not do it well was interesting.
Sure. So. Well, then. Obviously, Red Bull came to an end as far as your career with them. Sure. I mean, obviously, they're still around.
So then Red Bull. I left Red Bull to go to NC State.
So you started working for NC State.
Yeah, so went back to where I studied and worked with 2 master's degree programs that were partnerships with a French university. So, and what they were looking at, it was kind of the marketing pieces I had from Red Bull. These were 2, for a university, kind of underground programs. And we really utilized a lot of those grassroots marketing pieces the same way we did, not the same, but some of the tools we used at Red Bull to market a master's degree program, which was
Pinsgauer.
Yeah, we used a Pinsgauer. Yeah, we here, come interview for this program. We'll tow you across a lake. No, but just really thinking about, like, we had to do a lot with those programs with a very small budget for university-wise, so coming up with creative ways to market the program, to get in touch with potential students. So in that flavor, not necessarily the physical tools, but yeah. So there was 2 different programs, and they were both master's degrees with 2 French universities. and then one that I launched, one when I started, and then we launched one once I was there, which was the one I ended up being predominantly involved with, which was luxury program. So it was global luxury management, and it was, targeted at goods, products, services, kind of, experience. So if you think about like luxury goods, like your watch and automobiles, so transportation, and then experiential and hospitality. So it was kind of the whole gamut of luxury world and marketing to that. And so the students going through that, they were looking to go into typically marketing, buying roles, management roles within luxury brands. So, which is an interesting place to have in North Carolina at NC State, to have a luxury program. It's not New York. It's not Los Angeles. It was an interesting place to launch such a degree. So.
Well, it's also interesting because at NC State, they have a pretty profound design school.
Yeah, design, and we start off with textiles too. So they have a well-known textiles program, and we start off. It was somewhat of a collaboration between the College of Management and the College of Textiles. So it was kind of a partnership between those two.
So there was some overlap there.
Yeah. So it was, we did some stuff specifically textile. We had some specific textile classes some semesters, but then also it was overlap. Some of the professors might be experts in whatever form of textiles, and then so it was kind of a combination on the NC State side, but then also the French side. So long story short, without without giving you a whole pitch on a master's degree program, it was one semester in the U.S. here in Raleigh, and then one semester in France. And it changed. It started off in south of France the first 2 years, and then we switched it to Paris because the French university has a few different campuses. Their university system is very different than what we're used to here in the United States. That's a whole different subject, but. So they did one semester here, one semester there, and then they would do an internship program for the summer afterwards and go work directly in one of the luxury companies we had partnerships with. So.
Now, are those programs still in existence?
Yep, still going.
Doing well?
The luxury program, yes. The other one, I'm not sure the status. I think that one's actually migrated over to only being in the French university.
Oh.
I think. Don't quote me on that, but luxury program, yeah, it's still going strong. So.
Cool.
Yeah.
Nice. Well, then you are the owner, operator, maker of 440.
Toilet bowl cleaner.
Right.
Yeah.
So it started out as 440 Gnetleman Supply.
Sure.
And that was more or less a hobby, right?
Yeah. And
then talk about kind of the...
Yeah, so let's see here. So it started off as the side hustle many years ago, and I was trying to think, it was 2013, January, when I officially launched it, so almost 7 years, I guess. And it was side hustle that was a hobby. I enjoyed making some leather goods. I think the first thing I was making were suspenders, and it was really for myself because I was like, I want some leather suspenders. I don't know why I got that in my head that I needed leather suspenders. Doesn't everybody? It
was on the heels of like the Americana thing.
Yeah, and I was like, I need leather suspenders, and I couldn't find them, what I wanted. So I just I want to figure out how to make this shit. So made some, warm around, and then people started asking. So that was kind of the first thing that was being sold. Still do those a lot for weddings now is usually what there's a lot of people that do those. It's they're all custom made to order, custom size. So still do a lot of those. If you look, they're not on the website, but it's a custom kind of one-off still that I do a lot of. So yeah, started off really focused on just men's products. So that was the Gnetleman Supply part of it. I didn't want to say Derek Keller leather goods or anything leather because I was like, I had this vision when I was first doing something, like, I want to build this giant thing, and maybe there's other products that aren't leather. And
you didn't want to limit yourself.
Yeah, I was like, I don't know where this is going to go. And I still don't want to limit. I still want to have flexibility to and be nimble to what's working and what trends. I mean, like, for instance, Apple Watch bands is what really was the main thing the past 2 years that has been the main product, which when I first started wasn't even a thing. So,
right.
Being able to pivot and be it some custom work, which I'd kind of sworn off for many years because some custom work is never worth the time when you do it and do it over, and then it's not quite what they envisioned. It's, so it's easier to make your vision than somebody else's vision. So I had sworn off doing custom work for many time, but there is some things that maybe not branded under my stuff, but I do, other private label pieces and say like menu holders for restaurants and stuff kind of behind the scenes. So given that flexibility to kind of do what works, but I also still enjoy doing, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that's cool. I didn't know that you were doing stuff for private label.
Yeah,
that's awesome.
Yeah.
This week's episode is brought to you by Passion Fine Jewelry, located in Solana Beach, California, where owners Jana and Tim Jackson welcome you into their living room-like store, carrying a wide range of independent watches and variety of fine jewelry. Tim is GIA certified, and they also have a goldsmith in-house as part of their staff. Visit passionfinejewelry.com for more information, and if you're ever in Southern California, please make it a point to visit the store. You can also find a wealth of information via Tim's blog, independentintime.com. Of course, this is also brought to you by Standard H. Standard-H.com is where you'll find our online shop providing branded merchandise to support the podcast. And if you subscribe to our email list, you'll be one of the many insiders receiving exclusive special offers. Now back to the conversation with Derek. So why did you start with leather, per se?
So leather kind of came from, because my dad was making leather belts. I used to play with that. So it was something I was familiar with. I wasn't a pro at, but I loved it. I always loved, just buying leather goods, sniffing them, feeling them. It's like, I've always just loved the material. And I think for something to work with, it's got good things and bad things. One, as a learning process, it's really expensive when you screw it up, which that was a lot at first. And I think when I first started, I just bought every type of leather I could get my hands on in scrap form of small pieces to figure out how they worked, because even the same leather that's a 8 ounce versus a 4 ounce, it's going to completely work differently, so differently how it goes together. So
where were you going to buy those things?
Oh man, when I first started, it was Tandy Leather, which is like the big, they're kind of all over the U.S. So you can go in there and they have like a scrap bin. And I literally would just go in there every week and just buy, hey, I haven't seen this leather before. I just buy every color, every thickness, just everything I could get my hands on, and just basically I would just fuck with it for, like every piece I could get. Like, let me see what I can do to this and how it works. And from there really dialed down what I liked, and how it worked well for what I wanted to make. And my vision was always, and still, as you've seen with stuff, I don't like really thin leather, like the leather I always use. And I don't know why or where this came from, but my perception has always been like, thicker is better, thicker is quality. Like, and I don't think that's necessarily true for most people, but that's always been my vision. And I think a lot of people, when they do feel something, it's like, well, that's flimsy, if it's thin. Where if you pick up but make the same wallet made out of a really thin leather that's floppy, and you make one out really thick, yeah, it's heavy as shit, but the perception is, damn, this thing's bomb-proof. Like, I could run this over with my car, and it's going to be all right. My dog could chew this up, and it's still okay. The thin one, not so much. So that's kind of always been what I enjoyed making. Granted, for some pieces, it makes some of them so thick that's not ideal for a lot of people, but that's what I enjoy. And then aesthetically, that's what I like as well. So.
Actually, that was sort of touching on my next question, was like, how do you describe your products as far as like not just the assortment but the aesthetics as well? Like, where do you where does your inspiration come from and that kind of thing?
So oddly enough, I try to avoid following and looking at a lot of other leather brands. Because let's be honest, there's only so many different ways you can figure out how to make a wallet, or any small keychain or whatever. So I follow some other leather workers that I admire and are friends with, or gotten to know, but I try to avoid looking at too many of those, because I feel like I've been copied a lot and there's a lot of that out there. And as a small brand, you can't do anything. You can't protect all those designs, and it's not worth your while. But, so my inspiration really, I try to, I'm inspired by multiple things, but I like minimalism. So the designs are very simple, and I really look to a lot of architecture for design inspiration. As you know, like the the house we went to when we went to
Joshua Tree.
Yeah. So, love the roof line. So I made a wallet that mimicked the roof line. The first bifold I ever made was really a direct representation of a modernist house here in Raleigh that's referred to as the butterfly house, and the roof is shaped like, angled like butterfly wings, and it's got this door right in the middle. And so the first, which I haven't made this one in a long time, and it's no longer even, I don't think, on the website at all, but it was a direct kind of representation of the shape of that house, and even the door had a where, like, if you had your bills, in the bill slot, the little George Washington's face or whatever bill you had in there was peeking out the part where the front door will be. So it was kind of like, this is a playful way to make it, mimic that house. And then a lot of other ones. So I would say, that's typically inspiration for the designs are architectural based.
So why would you say stop making that piece, for example? Just out of, like, I've done it so much that it bores you?
It was just time to, I think so. Some of the ones I've been making since day one, that one, I don't have a good reason that I don't make that one, rather than it's been there, done that for, I think I did that one for 5 years, and it's like, let's retire that design. Maybe we'll revisit it at some point, but just to keep it somewhat fresh and something. And so and it's also somewhat limited. So the batches are, there's not a million of the same wallet out there. There's only going to be, and some of them, they're very limited. So I might only have enough. Maybe it's a special leather that I got somewhere, or a certain design. Maybe there's only 10 made, and that's it. So it's, I enjoy doing the small batch stuff. It's a lot more interesting than cranking out the same damn thing every day, every week. So got to keep it interesting.
So initially when you were making these things, like, because you were exposed to leather goods as a kid through your dad, like, did he help teach you how to make stuff, or were you on YouTube, or like, how'd you learn?
Well, not when I started this. I mean, he taught me a lot as a kid, which I remembered pieces of, and I think a lot of it, I mean, I did a lot of playing with his tools when he wasn't around, and probably screwed up all kinds of stuff and did it all wrong when he wasn't looking. But no, it was really kind of self-taught when I really started this. When I say how many years that was ago, it was a lot of YouTube videos. And the nice thing is, if you want to get into that, you can find an instructional video on everything. There's so many tools for leathercraft out there that you can literally find it all. So,
yeah,
which
absolutely.
I think that's probably the case with almost any craft now.
Sure. No. I mean, that's the beauty
being
of YouTube.
self-taught is pretty awesome. So.
Yeah. I know you use a lot of famous leather tanneries and stuff like that.
Yeah, I think my go-to is still Horween. I mean, that's
Chicago.
That's the one. Yeah, they've oldest tannery in the U.S. since 1906. It's, I mean, and not just, I mean, there's one, the Chrome XL, I would say, is my go-to for most things. I like I hate to use the word patina, but the quick patina you can get with that, and the pull-up, it's an aniline leather, so you get some really cool stresses immediately with it. It breaks in really easily. It smells awesome.
Yeah, that oil content's amazing.
Yeah, and you don't have to do anything to it. I mean, and for years to come, if you want to clean it up, you brush it off, but you don't even have to do that. I mean, I still have people come up to me here like, I got this from you when you first started, and it's Horween Chrome XL, and they haven't touched it, and it looks awesome. So, and it really gets a cool character over time. So that's my favorite, and that's my go-to. And then Cordovan from them as well is awesome. It's really expensive.
Yes.
And so that is definitely a small batch piece that I don't do a lot of, and it's hard to get. And I'm impatient, and I usually don't plan well for material ordering. So I'm like, shit, I need to make some of these really quick for this event. And of course, Shell Cordovan, it's a 6, 8, 12-month wait sometimes to get pieces of Shell Cordovan from the tannery.
Really?
Yeah. So it's, and same with, sometimes Chrome XL is the same way. It can be a long lead time on that, which, for me is a challenge because I'm not a good planner, but I'm just immediate gratification. I think everybody is now in the mindset too, like Amazon, I can order whatever and have it tomorrow. It doesn't work that way if you're trying to get really good pieces of leather. And Horween themselves are an interesting company to work with. It's direct from the tannery, and they're a very old school family run company still. I'd like to, they're awesome, but it's also one of those like, man, if somebody pitched a business plan to start a tannery the way they operate now, probably nobody would fund. They'd be like, that's not going to work. How are you going to do that? Because it is their demand. My perception from my side of the business is their demand is so great that they can kind of just
do what they want.
They kind of do what they want, and it's their time frame, and you have to adapt to their time frame, as opposed to, as a retailer or something like, oh man, you've got to serve the customer and have it ready at this time. It's kind of like, yeah, whatever. We'll get this leather done. When it's done, it's ready. It's going to sell whenever it's done.
That's Rolex right now.
Oh, really?
Yeah. That's Porsche. That's Rolex.
Yeah.
Anything that's worth having, really. I mean, not to say that Rolex and Porsche are the only thing worth having. I'm saying like things that are worth having. Yeah. The demand is going to be high.
Well, and this is somewhat of a sidebar from this, but interesting thing about leather industry that's really, I think, unique as well. I learned this. So I went to the Netherlands. There's a place called Stahl. I did a leather class there that is, they're kind of if you think of like a middleman in the leather industry. So they work with big and small brands and the tanneries. So they're kind of the middle person, two-part. They do.
Is that STAHL?
Yeah, correct.
Okay.
So they do a lot with the car industry as well. So they do a lot of leather, but they also do the synthetic pieces for like dashboards and all the materials for interiors of cars.
Right.
But the interesting thing, that they spoke about is, leather related is there's only a certain amount of leather available in the world every year. There's never a surplus of leather because it's not the main product. It's the amount of leather available is based on how many people are going to eat meat that year. And so that's purely like nobody's out there, at least that we source from, leather is the primary product. Leather is always a secondary product to the meat industry.
So it's always a meat cow that comes from, because obviously there's dairy cows and then there's meat cows.
Yeah,
is it always a meat cow?
That I don't know.
Okay, I was curious.
But yeah, but it is directly. I mean, that was it's like there's never a surplus because of that, unless people just stop eating meat suddenly, and then there's going to be a leather shortage. So interesting fact that I had never thought about until
you needed the leather.
I'm like, oh crap, I can't get any more of that. But interesting because Stahl as a company is interesting because they work with the middleman. So like say Louis Vuitton wants to come up with this certain color of leather that has these characteristics. They are the ones who would work with Louis Vuitton to figure out what features they want in that leather, and then they're going to figure out the formulas and then work with the tannery to tell the tannery this is what you need to do to create this leather. So they're the mad scientists of the leather industry, which is kind of neat.
That is
It's
cool.
a very different business model than I had seen anywhere else.
So when you were mentioning a second ago about Horween, like if you were to pitch that business today, it may or may not be able to exist. Have you worked with other tanneries that aren't Horween, obviously, aside from Stahl or whatever? But
yeah.
Do they operate similarly?
I mean, it does seem there's some overlap, but it's and some of the. I mean, I do try to source most of them in the U.S. However, I have had some overseas as well. Some of the Italian leathers, which I think when you go into international markets, maybe they're even more similar. If you think about Italy or France or anywhere, it's like because it's
heritage.
Yeah, it's a whole different ball game of doing business there. But yeah, I think there might be some similarities of just being with that industry. But I think if you compared like how that works with a clothing manufacturer would never fly, like that mindset of like, whatever. Well, I take that back because I just thought of one brand like maybe they can do that because they're just going to make this and then people are going to buy it. So it's
Hermes.
So like there are some out there where they can make it, but then there's still. I mean, you think about even some of the luxury brands like that in the clothing industry, there's still excess from those. Like, where does that stuff go? Horween, I don't think they have, there is no excess. Like, it goes somewhere and they're in such demand. So I think there's still something that puts them apart from even a luxury clothing line or something.
How are prices like a market price, like fish then, because of the supply and demand?
So it's obviously just, by this, quantity, obviously the larger quantity, the bigger break you get, makes it buying for the small guys harder. I think there's some other people doing some, for those who are, I guess, starting and want to try making leather goods. There's some great spots out there now to get smaller pieces at a reasonable, like shout out to District Leather Supply. He does a great job, and he's a relatively new supplier, but he was a maker before, so he was like a maker, and obviously saw like, man, like some of these challenges of like, I don't have $5,000 to order the minimum to make it worth, of Horween Chrome XL. I just need a few small pieces to make some to try out to sell these wallets that I want to make. And he really saw that need, and he's based in Atlanta and works with really good tanneries all over the world and brings in, and he does a really good job of, he's buying in large bulk, but cuts them into like 18-inch by 18-inch panels that are already cut square for people and sells small. So like, hey, you want to try this, this awesome Italian leather, you can buy a small piece for $25 and make some pieces out of it, as opposed to full hides, and spending thousands on something that you don't know if you even want to work with, if you don't, and that's the hard thing. There's no, unless you want to travel all over, you can't just put your hands on these things. Like, you've got to kind of get them in hand to see how they work. It's not like, hey, I just know that color. Even color, it's like, even buying online, it's like colors don't translate. And seeing how something ages, it's not like a watch. A watch is going to stay the same color, I think, for a lifetime. Where it's like leather, it's like maybe you want to get that and beat the shit out of it and see how it does for whatever purpose you're going to use it for.
So are most of your stuff handmade, or do you use machines at all?
It's all handmade, hand stitched.
So one needle.
Yeah.
One thread.
Yeah, and then I do have a vintage 1920s patcher machine that I used to use on some things. Don't really use it anymore. It's a beautiful machine that I just like to have in the workshop now, but I don't use it. It works great on some pieces, but it's still, vintage machines are a whole different beast of like keeping it consistent. And I think I used it for a while on some combo, like leather wax canvas combos. It works well on. But to keep going, do it on just leather on leather stitching, it's not the best tool for me, but
sure.
And it's, to be honest, like, it's not that much faster than what I can hand sew it now too.
Oh wow.
It's it's literally like an old pedal powered, crank machine, which is cool, and it's fun to use, and it makes an awesome noise, and it looks great, but it's, I still prefer to do it all by hand. So.
Just to touch on distribution for a hot second, what you have an online website, you've mentioned that.
Yep.
You're in stores. What's your distribution like mostly?
So I used to do more wholesale, which I backed off a few years ago. I kind of repositioned myself and stopped going after wholesale mainly. And that time, that was when it was a side hustle. So I left my full-time job 3 years ago to focus on this. And at the time when it was a side hustle, it was really a production issue, and I couldn't produce enough to do wholesale. And still, my prices, and there's so many different theories on pricing leather goods, but I want to be fair, and I think even since I started, like, I feel like when I started 2013, there were a decent amount of leather goods makers in the U.S. Now there's bukus, and everybody's making something, and so my pricing, initially, I think when I started the brand, I'm like, this is going to be the best wallet, and I can charge hundreds of dollars because it's going to last, for generations, which they do. But I think the consumers there's not enough of a market to do $300 wallets, especially location where we are. So, I've tried to streamline where I can do stuff fast enough to price it at a very reasonable price, but it's not a premium price product. So, all my bifold wallets are, unless it's a Cordovan wallet, are under $100 for a hand-sewn wallet that will last forever.
So what do those take you time-wise?
Oh, gosh.
Average,
I would say anywhere from... depends if I'm interrupted by our 2-year-old or the cat or if I get distracted by something else. I would say anywhere from an hour to 4 hours for a wallet.
Gotcha.
Which still, if you think about labor-wise, a 4-hour wallet, that's a bargain. It's still like I'm still like abusing myself labor wise a lot of times, but it's, I've tried to find the balance of where I still enjoy it. And that's part of going back to like, why do you stop making that one? Because I don't like making that anymore.
Right.
Where I've got to enjoy
or it takes longer than it should.
Yeah. So I've tried to streamline it to where, it's ones I know I can do in a reasonable time frame and keep the price where I want to. I'm not the best leather worker in the world. I don't want to try to price it that way, but I'm good. And the products are good. They're not, and are they good enough to where I could charge $500? No. And I think you have to, if you're making something, you have to come to a point. If I was charging $500 for those bifold wallets, I'd have to be, I hate to say more picky, but I feel like at a sub $100 price, say you have one stitch that's the slightest bit crooked, like something like nothing that's going to affect it, but like one little hole you punch is like just slightly off, or maybe like your logo it got stamped like just barely off from where the other ones were. Sub $100, I feel like you can do that and you still feel good about it. $500, you have to, that's when you're at everything has to be perfection, it looks like it's done by a robot.
Well, it's interesting because the theory of wabi-sabi, right?
Yeah.
The beauty of imperfection.
Yeah.
And that sort of is a byproduct of handmade goods.
Right.
Whereas some people might actually appreciate that thing being a bit askew just due to the fact that I know for sure this was done by hand, by a human, not a robot.
Yeah.
And I'll actually pay a premium sometimes for a mistake.
Well,
what is viewed as a mistake.
Exactly. And I don't want to say like cutting corners, but I think there's some ways, if you're thinking about production and how to make it profitable, even thinking like the very first runs of wallets I was doing, I spent, hours burnishing edges and painting the edges over and like getting the edges just like, oh, well, let me shine it some more. Let me buff it some more. And now it's like, I can do, a pretty short buffing process and it's good. And really, if you look at, I think a lot of, and there's some people who do way better and most beautiful burnished edges that look like glass and just pieces of art. Those aren't mine. Mine are good. They're smooth. They're even. But the funny thing is, if you looked side by side a wallet who somebody spent 6 hours burnishing versus one that somebody spent 30 minutes burnishing, and after it's been used for a few months, they all look the damn same.
Yeah.
It's like that's the way they got, hey, it looks awesome still on the shelf, but when you use it, they all look the same.
Well, it's so funny you say that too, but because of your aesthetic, and if I may weigh in on an opinion, like the aesthetic of your products to me are just a bit more rustic.
Yeah.
So if you did those fine tooth kind of, fine details, it wouldn't have the same look.
Right.
So then your brand identity becomes another identity.
Right.
Now, whether that's conscious or not, I don't know. But I'd say, stop wasting your time.
And that's kind
Keep
of the
doing what you're
conclusion
doing.
I came to. I'm like, what's the point of spending that extra few hours or hour or whatever? Like I could, instead of continuing to perfect the burnish on this edge, I could make another wallet. Like, what's the point? Like,
100%.
why don't I just make two wallets with edges that take less time than one wallet with these edges that took me so long?
And then that gets your brain going again with like, well, then what does pricing become?
Right.
Because like, let's say let's just for the sake of math, you make $40,000 a year.
Yeah.
That's pretty much $20 an hour.
Yeah.
Now, if you paid yourself $20 an hour, because 40 grand in Raleigh is something different than 40 grand in New York City.
Yeah.
Then if you scale it out, to do the math of how much a wallet should cost.
Yeah.
And you're spending 4 hours just on the details,
right,
let alone the actual construction.
Yeah.
It becomes a different beast.
Yeah. And that's just a beast. I think I just came to the conclusion years ago, I don't want the beast that is, I want to be premium, but I'm not trying to be the end all be all with leather brands, Well, there's plenty of people out there.
There's plenty of them,
that have the heritage behind them already too, where it's me right now. And I'd like to build something that lasts, but I'm not trying to compete with the big boys,
Yeah. Well, I mean, not as a shameless plug for Standard H, but like, that's why I didn't want to do sketchy, meaning like doodles of cars on t-shirts. Like, there are so many cartoonish looking t-shirts of cars out there that I have zero interest. Like
Yeah.
that's not what Standard H is.
Yeah.
And much in the same way that
Yeah,
440
totally agree.
shouldn't be this art project
Yeah,
for your
exactly.
back pocket.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you want to use it and frankly abuse it.
Yeah.
And
Well-
it will stand the test of time due to its thickness, for example.
When I think your mindset changes too, when I first started and it was a hobby, I feel like you can, maybe if you want to toy with that and you want to be that best in the world, because you're not paying the bills with it then. But when you're starting to pay the bills, like, we need to rethink this
Yes.
and really take a dive into what's profitable and not to say like, if you're trying to make $1 million, this is the wrong way to do it. But it is. This is the wrong way to do it if you want to get rich. This is not. This is a labor of love for sure.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm sure people are making good money, but that's not my goal. You know, I want to pay the bills and do what I love doing.
Well, we kind of took a left turn from the distribution. So you kind of ditched wholesale.
Ditched wholesale, gone more direct to consumer, and then direct via our own retail store. So,
And what is that called?
So we have really, my wife started her store many years ago. She's had it for 17 years. So we have it's called Edge of Urge, and there's a store in Wilmington, store in Raleigh, and then we've got some other things in the works in Raleigh as well. So we sell direct, and pretty much everything is stocked in there. So that's kind of like home base, you know, for everything. We want to call it a flagship store.
Well, no, it is for
yeah,
sure.
so that's kind of where the main outlet is for it to see in person. So.
And then, so where does that bring you to today, obviously? Because you're in downtown Raleigh, you're in Wilmington, and then that brings us to a couple of pieces of news, right?
Well, I can tell you where we are right now. The space we're in now, I can talk about if you want to go
Sure.
into that.
Yeah.
So we're in a space in downtown now that we're working on. That's a different concept, a new retail concept. So the name will be called Renew, but it's a more kind of self-care based retail concept. And then we've got another concept that will be exact time frame TBD, but we're hoping to be up and running by holidays of this year. It's going to be called Unlikely Professionals. And it'll be a kind of men's based retail with a bar concept to it as well. So come in, grab a awesome local brew, and look at some motorcycles in the space and shop some cool men's gear.
Any allegiance or affiliation to Miller Lite here?
There might be some Miller Lite available in there. We'll see. We're still working out the
YTD.
I mean, we might need the High Life in there.
Right. Oh man, you got to have the champagne and beers. You have to. And Red Bull.
But hey, who knows?
Champagne and Red Bull. What did you call those things? Shambles?
Shambull. Yeah.
Shambles.
Champagne and Red Bull, man. Try it. You'll like it.
Oh man. So as far as the Edge of Urge is concerned, those boutiques, what else do you carry within those four walls?
So we've got a mix of men's, women's apparel, and then gift, home. We've got baby. It's odd when you have a baby how you add more baby stuff to your store.
Right.
So yeah, we've got a little bit of everything. But now with the new concepts, we'll have, I guess, the OG Edge of Urge. You know, we'll kind of stay the same, but we're moving the men's into our new space. So the men's will kind of pull out. The men's will pull out.
I might edit that out.
We'll be moving the men's, you know, into the new So the new concept is directly across the street. So we'll kind of have the women's concept on one side, the men's on the other side, and the men's space will kind of have a garage vibe to it. So it's like we all have, you know, the buddy that has the garage you want to go hang out in and drink beer. That's kind of what that space is going to be.
That's kind of your garage, if I'm not mistaken.
Okay, maybe I'm basically moving my garage into
Are you doing that? Are you moving
there
the
is
product
a lot of,
from your garage?
There's actually
because you make your stuff in your garage.
Yeah, so yeah, I have a home workshop in the garage, which is filled with a lot of leather tools, a lot of vintage pieces, a lot of vintage motorcycles, vintage motorcycle parts, and soft goods as well. And then the part we didn't touch on, which I'll go ahead and mention if that's okay, is another side project that's related, is 440 Moto, which I started 2-3 years ago. But I do a lot of that in the garage as well. So that's a collection of vintage motorcycle jackets that I repair, alter as needed as they come in. So that's the other another small project, but a lot of that's done in there. So if you go in my garage, it's a lot of motorcycles, a lot of leather, a lot of hides, and a lot of vintage jackets hanging everywhere that are either getting ready to be repaired, just received, or getting ready to move out the door. So.
And how have those been received?
Great.
Because they're all unique pieces.
Yeah, they're all one of a kind. I mean, I think that's another one that's like a passion project of mine too, because I love vintage, I love motorcycles, I love leather jackets, motorcycle jackets. So sourcing those are, it's kind of fun. It's like my inner American Pickers if I could ever quit doing everything else. So just like want to go hang out with those guys.
Sure.
But so it's kind of taking that, the seek and the, finding those, but then having the skills and some of the, and that's where the patcher machine does come into play as well. So that vintage machine, I use more on some of that now. And maybe it is patching, actually what it's intended for, I actually do patch some things and, but it's repairing and finding those really cool old pieces and
what are
giving
some of
them new life.
Sorry, what are some of those brands?
Everything. So I do a lot of Belstaff. I would say Belstaff is my go-to of what I love most. The big ones, Belstaff Barber, Shot, Lewis Leathers I've had some of, but then some are ones you probably never heard of that are small, European made, that are just small brands that aren't even around, ones that were from the 60s, 70s, they cranked out, that oddly enough, the cuts on those are usually the fits what we would like on them. It's, if you look at like the 80s US brands, they fit us terribly. It's like the sleeves are gigantic. It's like bad fitting suits, is how most of those jackets were cut. You can find the European jackets from the 60s and 70s that are tailored, that are just awesome.
My biggest gripe with jackets, be it a blazer, a suit jacket, an outerwear piece, it's always the armhole.
Oh, yeah.
How high is it cut? Europeans always get it right.
Yeah.
American brands just suffer miserably.
Yeah. Same with motorcycle jackets. I think it's across the board.
Well, and how important is the armhole in a motorcycle jacket? I mean, it's extremely important.
Yeah.
You're leaning over,
Yep.
which is why the sleeve length is typically a little longer
Right.
so that you're outstretched.
Yep.
Not a lot of people know that.
Yeah.
But it's one of those things where, like, it's quintessential. Like, you
Yep.
can't have the armhole misplaced or misaligned, or else you literally can't ride your bike comfortably.
Yep. That's true.
So
I tell you I forgot we were talking about the garage.
we were talking about distribution.
What were we talking about?
No, that's all good. We were talking about distribution, but and so, like, personally, I think if you would duplicate your garage in that space, like almost literally, your garage looks so good.
Oh, well, thanks.
And even though it may or may not have been planned out to put what where, it's insanely cool. Like, anytime you post those photos on Instagram or your story or whatever, like, I want to be in that space because it's like, it's warm, first of all, because there's a lot of stuff, and it's kind of, it's like a big embrace, right, of things.
Yeah.
But on the same note, it's like so on brand, and like you should literally, if you can, take it. My personal opinion. And just duplicate that.
Yeah.
Just literally take a picture and duplicate it in your space, because it's really incredible.
Cool.
Like the kind of accumulation that you've been able to accomplish.
It's called hoarding.
Many would argue, but yet it elicits or solicits this feeling, you know, of like, this. Wow, it's so cool.
Oh, well, thanks.
Yeah.
Well, you can come over anytime.
Right. So on that note, like, how do you define your customer? Like, who is your customer?
Oh, man. So that's a good question. I think it's also changed over the years. So
that was my next question.
Yes.
Has that person changed?
Yeah, we went back. So, and this is partly props to my wife, I think, on this one, because she has, I think she kind of opened my eyes, because if you see everything I own, it's like brown. What shoes are you going to buy? Brown, black, brown. What color shirt are you wearing? Brown, black. And she's like, why don't you bring some color into this shit? There's a million people making leather goods and wallets that are brown and black. Why don't you find some interesting colors? And she's the opposite when it comes to colors. She has everything that's, you name it, bright colored, leopard print, wild, and that's not what I typically wear. But on that note, I found some really cool leathers that are being used now, like you've seen, I think a lot of what I've promoted lately too are like ghost leather, which is this amazing leather that comes in all these bright colors, but it starts off with this, it literally is like a ghost white color. And as it ages, it shows more of whatever the underlying color is. So like there's a mint green, there's a pink, there's a red.
So quite literally there's a color underneath its surface.
Yeah, so if you look like
and the white will go away.
Yeah, so it's like, I mean, and if you wanted, I would never encourage this because I think it looks awesome, and to see it age, you could literally buff it all off immediately. Like if you just took up like a really heavy rag or something, get to the color if you wanted to just hurry up and turn it mint green. But if you look at all of the colors to start off, they all look like this pale ghost white across the board. You can turn it over and look at the backside and see what it will turn into. So you see the backside is that it's a turquoise or red or whatever. But they all look close to being the same on the outside to start with. So finding some interesting colors like that is what I've enjoyed doing too, and adding that in. And given that note too, I think, my customer when I started out was predominantly male-based. I sell a lot to females now as well, so that's part of kind of rebranding as well, and kind of dropping the gentleman. Yeah, the gentleman part is slowly disappearing from things, but there's a lot more unisexy pieces as opposed to just stuff for dudes.
Unisexy. I like that. That's funny.
But it's I think it's partly some of the new designs, but also some of the colors. So it's no longer all brown.
Sure. So how has the business changed? I mean, I guess you've sort of answered that because of initially starting in wholesale and then
I think mostly direct to consumer now is really the business as it is. And never say never. I take that back. I do still very small bits of wholesale. I do some key accounts like in the airport. So I do have in Root and Branch and the RDU airport. But keeping it because I'm just not in the position to mass produce enough to have a wide distribution network. So some key ones that make sense, for me and that I enjoy working with.
Sure. Is there anything you would have done differently in hindsight?
Oh man, that's a good question. I've never really thought about that. I think
that's probably a good thing.
Well, I mean, yeah, because I think there's. So when I quit my full-time job to focus on this 3 years ago, and I think having the balls to do that maybe earlier would have been better because I was, kind of chugging along. Like I think because there was a period where it was jamming, the side project, this was jamming, but it was, I was working full-time job during the day, all night long, up until very little sleep and literally just burning the candle at both ends.
That's when you need like a coffee sponsor.
Yeah. Coffee, liquor. Whatever to ease the pain. But I think if I had, I hate to say it, the balls to take that leap earlier, which was a scary thing, which, by the way, timing on that was interesting too. I quit my job and then found out my wife was pregnant like the week after.
I feel like that's super common.
So it's like
not the pregnancy part, but just like there's always some life event that happens when people finally jump.
Yeah. Well, it was like, oh shit, wait a minute. There goes my life or health insurance. Now we have to buy health insurance. And
right. Yeah.
Because now, we're both self-employed, so that's a whole different thing. So, but I think, in hindsight, if I had really made the moves earlier, I would have been a lot happier, if that makes sense, as opposed to doing those all-nighters. And I think there was a time where, earlier where I could have made that leap. It still is not an easy leap. It was not like you can have you don't live like you did before. You don't go out to eat like you did before. You got to cut corners a lot.
Financially.
Financially, a lot of cuts, but it's, it's worth it. So.
Sure. So is there any plan to grow the assortment necessarily in a different direction? Because you mentioned wallets, you mentioned suspenders.
Yeah.
You've done some totes.
Yeah, do some bags on occasion. I think my goal is to really be able to, I want to say automate, but there are some machines I would like to invest in that will help me kind of produce a little bit more and some bigger items. So the bags I do very few of, and they're always a hot item. And I quite literally have a waiting list usually for those for when I make them. But it's one of those that my current process is kind of dreadful. I mean, it will take me 2 days to make a bag for somebody. Literally, like, I'm going to get up that morning, I'm going to work on this for 2 days. And do the math on that. You look at the price of the bags that are on the website, do the math. That's not necessarily a good move on my end.
What's the price?
They're the 300, depending on which leather, it's the 3 to 375 range for a solid big leather bag with a lot of solid brass hardware on it. Not necessarily a good move on my end. It's a long, and it's literally a hard labor process. I think I counted, and there's 35 rivets hand riveted on each of those bags. So you're talking about hammering, because I don't have a machine. That's all hand riveted, hand hammered, cut. 35 of those each bag too, that's a lot of hammering.
Yeah. No. Yeah, absolutely.
And hand stitching. The stitching, I counted the stitches. I don't remember what it was. It's a lot. It's just a lot of labor.
Well, you mentioned your daughter.
Yeah.
She's approaching 2.
Yep.
How has being a father affected your business, or has it?
Oh, yeah. Time management is a whole new game now.
Sure.
I mean, it's always been tough, but now you throw in even, you can work when she goes to bed. Man, I'll tell you what, when she goes to bed, you are beat.
Right.
Like, if you work all day, and, luckily she's in school some days now, so I can get some stuff done during the day. Because we initially, we're both self-employed. We thought at first that we could juggle it. We don't need any kind of help. We can just, we can make our own schedule. Here, you keep her for this little bit. I'll keep her. You go do some stuff. I'll keep her. You do some stuff back and forth.
Yeah.
It doesn't work.
Well, I appreciate you taking the time.
Oh, yeah. She's at school right now.
If I forget to say it later, thank you.
Yeah. So, I mean, she's awesome. She's a wild child, but, when, I guess at that age, I don't know, maybe when she's a little bit older, you can actually do stuff while she's awake in there. But right now, she's a curious kid. It was funny when she was really little, I would bring her out, like, because she was so small, she would just nap a lot, and I would just bring her crib out in the garage and have her next to me and work, Now that's not the case.
She slept through the hammering and such?
I wouldn't hammer. I kept it down. Like, I would save the hammering for later, but
sound sleeper.
But yeah, but now it's like, oh, Daddy, what's that tool? Let me play with that. So like grabbing every sharp object and trying to commit suicide at every moment. So it's like, and my garage, while you said it's a cool space, it's not a baby-friendly space.
No, it's not.
I mean, there's motorcycles to knock over. There's sharp objects. There's rusty things. It's terrible. It's terrible.
She's had her tetanus shot? Or?
Oh, yeah. She's good on her shots. Yeah, she's safe. And she likes to wear her helmet around, just even if she's not trying to ride her bike. So sometimes she just wears she calls it her Helmo, kind of like Elmo, but Helmo. So she just wears her Helmo around randomly, looking crazy, but
that's cute.
So that keeps her safe, kind of.
Awesome. Yeah,
in case something falls up in the ceiling in there.
Oh man, well that's awesome. Was there anything else you wanted to promote or talk about?
Oh man, I don't know.
It's always good to catch up.
Yeah, it's a good time.
Can we grab a beer?
Yeah, I don't think it's too early for. What time is it? I think it's beer 30.
11:45.
Hey, I don't have a problem. You have a problem.
Right on, man. Well, Derek, again, thanks, man.
Oh yeah, thank you
for taking the time.
Yeah,
obviously crazy busy.
Great to see you as usual.
Yeah, for sure.
Cool.
All right, man.
All
Chat
right.
soon.
All right, see ya.
Just want to thank Derek one more time for taking part of the podcast. Always good to see you, brother, and look forward to catching up again sometime soon. Thanks very much. This episode has been brought to you by Clear Audio, CLEER audio.com. Music provided by the talented Jensen Reed and Super Beautiful. And until next time, this is Wesley Smith for Standard H. Thanks so much for listening.